I'm Peter Vaughan, and today I'm in the south of France, as you can see from this beautiful Mediterranean azure blue sky. No, not really. I'm at Smeaton Lakes at Newark in Nottinghamshire. Nice campsite with carp lakes, fishing, all that sort of thing. And just down the road from Brownhills, who have supplied this latest addition to their dealer special range. Now this is the Champagne Edge 466, based of course on Swift's entry-level Edge range, but called Champagne because it's Brownhills dealer special. And it's got a champagne coloured cab. That's just one of many features that you get as an extra on a dealer special like this. Now you can clearly see it's got an awning as well. That's part of the dealer special spec as well. There's a solar panel on the roof, the alloy wheels, and more stuff that we'll go into as we go through the van. Of course, as a dealer special, it's exclusive to Brownhills, but the standard Edge 466 is available throughout the Swift nationwide dealer network. Of course, it's based on the Fiat Ducato with the 140 bhp engine. You can have it as a manual, as here, at 55,995, or you can pay a bit extra for the automatic, still with the 140 bhp engine. Whichever you go for, manual or automatic, it's on a 3,650 kilo chassis. Now, if you're wondering why an entry-level motorhome would need such a heavy chassis and not just be on a 3.5 ton, it's because this is the most family-friendly model in the Edge or the Champagne Edge range. It's a full 6-berth with 6 travel seats. So we'll take a look at the layout, a new bunk bed layout, in a minute. Now, on that 3,650 kg chassis, it has 590 kilos of payload, so pretty good for an entry-level motorhome. You'll notice too that this is an overcab. Now, we thought at one point that overcabs were dying out, but they seem to have been making a small renaissance, especially in entry-level vans and from some of the imported marques. Now, you'll also notice that this is on a standard height Fiat chassis rather than one of the low-line chassis or Alco chassis, and it does stand a bit taller on the road. I've only driven it quite briefly so far, but I did notice on the way here, coming around a roundabout, there was a bit more lean than I expected, and you do need to take that into consideration. There's quite a substantial rear overhang too, so you want to be careful about loading too much stuff towards the back of the van, especially if you've got bikes on the back, and you'll see that the bike rack mounts are already in situ. Just get the dealer to fit the rack. Underneath is your wastewater tank. Does hang rather low, looks a tiny bit vulnerable down there to me, especially with this protruding waste tank, which is just it's a little bit fiddly compared with some, but 60 litres the wastewater tanks are quite small, but the freshwater tank, that's much better. That's inboard, and that's 100 litres. Always like to see an inboard water tank because it's better, of course, for winter camping. In the summer, day like today, you might need to hose yourself off, and there's an attachment there for an external shower. Gas locker, of course, here, and look at the height off the ground. You're going to need to eat some spinach before you lift your Cala bottle into there. The body is constructed using Swift's smart construction, which is all glass fibre on the outside. And then you've got some additional features like this external mains socket. If you want to use a mains appliance outside, that could be quite handy. And of course, your external gas barbecue point. Electric step that automatically retracts when you start up, but the habitation door isn't linked to the cab's remote central locking. It has got 2-point locking on the door, but as I say, not central locking. And then you've got a fly screen on the door, bin on the door as well. And then moving back, I suppose this is the most interesting part of the layout, because being a bunk bed van with the bunks running across the back of the vehicle, you've got quite a useful amount of storage space under the bottom bunk. However, if you want more storage, and the bed base just hinges up and locks into place. Now, in that position, you've got a storage area that's over 0.7 metres wide and 1.2 metres high. Really generous height. You get get standard bicycles in there, but notice you are a long way off the floor and everything has got to be lifted back in there. Of course, if you want to get to site and then use that bottom bunk, you'll need to store the second mattress, perhaps either on top of the upper bunk or in there alongside all your other gear. But loads of room for outdoor chairs, barbecues, and even bikes, as I say. Now, just a couple of other things before I get out of the sun and before I melt. Overall length, that's 7.32 metres. Overall height is 2.98 metres, so just under the 3 metre mark, which is quite useful if you're planning on touring in France, because anything over 3 metres high on the autoroutes you get charged higher rates. The other thing you should note perhaps is that this vehicle doesn't come with a spare wheel. You get a fix and go kit. Now if that worries you, perhaps you're going to be touring in the Hebrides or something where your chances of finding one of these camper tyres is, well, not likely to go well, then of course you might want to carry a spare wheel in the garage area, but do remember that that will eat into your payload. 599 kilo payload, as I said earlier on. Now at the front of this Edge 466 you get quite a traditional layout with a side settee and a Pullman dinette. Now the key reason for adopting a layout like this is because you can easily incorporate 4 rear passenger seats, so 6 in total with the cab seats, and you've got 3-point lap and diagonal belts even on the rear facing seat. Often, particularly on Continental models, you sometimes just see lap belts on rear facing seats. So 4 of you can get around the table. There is a slot-in extension. It's not permanently fitted to the table. It's stored in a cupboard at the back and you just slot that in. I'll demonstrate that in a second. Table then fixed to the wall. Windows have got nice posh pleated blinds and fly screens. You perhaps wouldn't expect that, and you might have expected Swift to leave out the curtains, but they do add a bit of homeliness to it, as do the scatter cushions. Seats, I've been sitting there here having my lunch, and I have to say the dinette area is quite comfortable, although I'm not sure I'd want another one of me sat next to me, particularly on such a hot and sweaty day. Lighting, well, there's mood lighting above the top lockers and these little pin lights, little downlighters underneath the top cabinets. It's much too bright and sunny today to tell how effective those are going to be, but I would like a bit more sort of ceiling light, some high lights centrally mounted in the ceiling to give a bit more general illumination. I think that might be necessary at night. Other than that, as I say, quite a spacious lounge area. It doesn't incorporate the cab seats don't swivel. Windows quite small, but some people will prefer that, gives a bit more privacy. So that's very much a personal thing, whether you like that or not. Top hinged, of course, so we're getting a bit of through draft through the van today. And then, of course, you've got the big overcab bed above, which we'll come on to in a minute. Storage, well, under the forward-facing seat you've got the freshwater tank, so there's no storage under there. You've got a bit of storage under the rear-facing seat around the substantial-looking steel structure for the seat itself, because of course this is a travel seat. And then, interestingly, you've got more storage over on this side. This is much more accessible and more generous in capacity, and nice and easy to get to, better than we've seen on some more expensive coach builds where sometimes it's a bit fiddly to get to under seat space, but that is nice and accessible. Over here you've also got a bracket for a TV, but no swing out arm or anything posh like that. And do remember, if you're tall, that headroom does decrease as you go into the cab. So the table extension I mentioned is in this wardrobe, and you just lift it out and slot it in, and then there's a little clip underneath just to hold it secure. Now I talked earlier about this being an overcab coach built, and here's the overcab bed, but it is slightly unusual in that you haven't got a massive peak out over the windscreen. So the bed actually comes partly over the main lounge and living area rather than right out over the cab. Now that makes a more aerodynamic shape at the front, of course, and it doesn't really intrude very much into the living area. The advantage, of course, over a drop-down bed in a low profile, well, it's a lot less complicated, probably weighs a bit less because you've got no mechanism, just a couple of gas struts, and of course you've got these full-size cupboards above the lounge as well. But it's not all good news. Simple enough to operate, just pull it down. Of course you can still use your lounge area now, unlike in a lot of low profiles, and I should show you plenty of room to sit underneath the bed. Just attach the ladder and up you go. Once you're up here, you can see headroom is quite limited, 530 millimeters, 540 millimeters I think maximum, and it does tail off towards the front of the vehicle. So some people might feel claustrophobic up here, others of course will be used to overcab coach built motorhomes. Bed measurements 1.9 metres long by 1.33 metres wide, and actually you've got a little bit more usable length than that because there's room for your feet to overhang at the end, overhang the mattress at the end before you get to the wall. Ventilation is limited, just the one window, so on a really hot day like today it's a bit boiling up here. Pity there's no roof vent above as well, or a second window to get a bit of through draft. There's one reading light, and the other thing we notice, although the Duvet mattress is very comfortable, it's just on a solid base. There's no slats or anything underneath, which is a bit of a surprise. Now, if you don't fancy that overcab bed, or if there are 6 of you and you need to use all the berths, well, this is the other option. Table just slots in between the two Pullman dinette benches. The backrest comes off there, and there's a little infill to go underneath where the head restraint supports are. An infill cushion. Now the infill cushions all store at the back in one of the wardrobes, and I've got those out already. And then on this side you just pull out the slatted base again, and finally another infill. Quite a lot of joins in this bed, but it is very long, very long, 2.14 metres by 1.22 metres. And of course you've got no issues of headroom, even if the overcab bed is in use as well. Although, once you made this bed up, you can't use the ladder anymore. Another option to consider is that if mum and dad do sleep in the overcab bed and you don't need all 6 berths, you could make this just into a single and keep the aisle, keep the use of the ladder. Now this bed is obviously simple to make because you just drop in the table and the cushions into the middle, and it's 1.8 metres long maximum by 0.94 metres or 940 millimetres long, so probably not quite enough for me, but for a kid, be fine. So now you've seen the 2 double beds in this van, but the layout of the 466 is all about these rear bunks. And having motorhomed around Europe in a bunk bed motorhome, similar sort of layout to this, I have to say, if you've got particularly younger children, this is the sort of layout you need to be looking at, perhaps above all else. And how does this work for 2 kids? Well, even teenagers will be happy in here. 2.02 metres long, 0.85 metres wide. Both beds are the same size, so Penguin here won't argue with the dog above. Where they might have a slight difference of opinion is, well, possibly headroom, because this bed has 780 mils of headroom and the top bed slightly less, 560 millimetre headroom. And also there is, of course, the appeal of going to bed up a ladder, which, well, I don't perhaps understand as an adult, but when you're 7 or something, it's quite appealing. Both beds come with their own opening window and a reading light, and both have their own curtains too. Of course, another really important aspect with a family van is storage, and you've already seen that there's quite a decent amount of space under that bottom bunk bed, even if you don't fold it up into sort of garage mode. And then you've got 2 wardrobes. Now this one looks huge, but actually isn't. Although it's quite a decent width, it has only shirt length hanging because it's hiding the gas locker underneath. Rather more important, I thought, it was this shelved cupboard here. Lots of room for jumpers, warm weather gear, socks, pants, all that sort of thing can go in there, and they'll be kept nice and warm because the Combi 6 gas electric boiler is underneath. And then over on this side you've got full height storage in 2 separate sections. Top one shelved, and you've got your infill cushions for the front bed in there, but still a good amount of space. And then below, yes, you've got the table extension in there, but you've actually got a deeper, taller hanging space in there, slightly taller than over this side. Not as big, but as I say, slightly deeper hanging height. And now, while I was looking around this area, I thought this is a lovely open shelf for whoever's sleeping up top. It needs some USBs there or something, maybe even a little TV bracket, but that might keep the kids awake all night, but certainly USBs. And then I found them over in the corner next to the light. However, downstairs, whoever's sleeping down there gets a 3-pin socket, and it hasn't got a cover on it either, so I'm not keen on that in a kid's bedroom. So you've spent 56 grand on this motorhome, and you've got 4 kids. Probably not a great deal left in the budget for eating out then. So this kitchen is really important. And you've got built-in microwave for those panic must have beans on toast now mum moments. And there it is. Oven and grill for a bit more serious cooking, and 3 gas rings as well. So plenty of opportunity for rustling up those meals. And plenty of room to prepare them too. A good amount of worktop next to the sink, and then additional worktop hinges up next to the door. You do also get a removable draining board and a chopping board, but neither of those are actually in this test vehicle as of now, and I think they've been taken out so they don't get nicked in the showroom, but never mind. You can imagine those. What you don't have to imagine is that there are 2 drawers, one inside that cupboard and another underneath the oven. Also a decent amount of cupboard space. Neither of the drawers have cutlery holders, so you'll have to nip down to the accessory shop and buy one of those, but you do get plate and cup racks in that top cupboard. The only perhaps disappointing aspect is that the fridge is really rather small. 85 litre 3-way fridge. Well, these days we're often seeing not far short of double that in even some van conversions. So the final part of the Champagne 466's layout, of course, is the washroom opposite the kitchen, and it's an all-in-one unit. No separate shower, unfortunately, in this van. You have got plenty of room to use the wash basin here with the tall mirror above, and loads of shoulder room and leg room sitting on the cassette toilet. So those are the good points. Storage a little bit under the basin and an open shelf above the toilet, but that's all you get. And I can't help feeling that when you pull this curtain around, it's going to rather cling to you when you're showering. Before we conclude on this Swift Champagne Edge, I ought to just talk a little bit about the Fiat cab. It's very familiar, of course, but there are a few niceties on this one. For a start, it's got passenger airbag, cruise control and cab air conditioning all as standard. You get the leather steering wheel as well and the chrome ring dials. So it does look a little bit more upmarket than some entry-level motorhomes. You also get a DAB radio as standard. Not sat-nav on this one, but you do get a reversing camera with the screen replacing the central mirror. There's no through view anyway, so this is pretty redundant. Obviously, the reversing camera hasn't yet been fitted on this particular example. As I said at the outset, 140 bhp engine as standard, with the manual gearbox as here, or the 9-speed automatic. Now, obviously, you're going to compare this with a standard Swift Edge if you're in the market for this sort of motorhome. And it's worth bearing in mind that Brownhills say there's over £4,000 worth of extra kit on this particular vehicle. In the past, bunk bed coach builds like this have usually come from imported brands, so it's good to see a British rival to those vehicles. And there's quite a lot going for this Swift Champagne, especially with all the added kit that Brownhills have specified, even including a tracker security system and a TV aerial. Now, what else should you consider? Well, of course, you have to be able to drive it. You'll need a C1 licence because it's 3,650 kilos rather than 3.5 tonne or less. And you'll also have to be happy with driving a vehicle that's best part of 7.5 metres long, which, if you're new to motorhomes, well, that might be something to consider. But if you want a family van, this one is plenty spacious enough. It will sleep 6, probably better if you're only 4, but you know, 6-berth motorhomes aren't that common on the market. Downsides, well, the fridge is small, some of the storage, the gas locker's a bit high, the rear garage area is quite high to load into too, and of course there's no separate shower. But as I say, on the plus side, you've got a big kitchen, good storage, reasonable payload, and the fact that it's British might just swing it for you. Thanks for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this latest video. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and of course, tick the like.